So, hi everyone, and welcome to a new series that I'm doing, which is interviewing some of the best and most interesting historians across various different fields of expertise. So, to kick off this new series, I am here today with an author who has a vast array of books and topics, from Romans to forgotten histories to American presidents underneath his belt. Nevertheless, he is perhaps best known for the highly rated book, The Sultans, The Rise and Fall of the Ottoman Rulers and Their World, a 600-year history. So with that in mind, I'd like to welcome populist historian Jem Duducu. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. Hello.
There we go. So thank
That
you
is
for
an
coming.
amazing intro.
I know. I
Thank you so much for
that. Good hype man, I am. So, essentially, you have all of these publications, which we'll get into in due course, but there seems to be, from what I can understand from your Twitter and the various things you've done, there's a whole devotion that you have to history. Where did this come from?
So it's I can remember when it was first kindled in me. I was in junior school, and you used to get Ladybird books, and this was I'm presuming it's called the Ladybird book of history. And basically what happened, on one page there was a cool picture, on the other page there was like 2 paragraphs of information summarizing a huge topic of whatever it may be. And I remember a picture of the Crusades. I thought that looked really exciting. And I remember a picture of a tank in World War One. And so I'm pretty sure today there will be all kinds of, why are you picking the battles and all the stuff that is this questionable, is this Eurocentric, whatever. But the point is, for little 6-year-old Jem's brain, it's like, oh my God, these stories aren't fairy stories. This all really happened. And so that's basically, I was hardwired in since then. I'm one of the few people who has a GCSE in medieval history.
Oh, wow. So, I mean, how did you then go from there to being a populist historian? Because typically, I mean, like myself, I've kind of gone all eggs in one basket on a very niche. I mean, my dissertation that I just finished was on 1213 to 1230. So how did you kind of separate yourself from an extremely specific thing to then a vast array of history?
Well, my dissertation, I always remember going up to my lecturer, and I wanted to do it on the Mongol expansion of the 13th century and its impact on the crusading movement. And he just smiled and went, "Are you just trying to get as much violence as possible into the subject?" I went, "Yes, I am." Yeah. And he went, "Okay, it's valid. It's a valid story." And so that's what I did. It's been quite a journey. Okay, Luke, you're a young guy. I envy you. You have a full, beautiful head of hair. You have no wrinkles yet. You have your whole life ahead of you. And so when I was your age, the social media hadn't invented yet. I loved reading history books, and I got a proper job, and I still have a variation proper job today because it pays the bills. And I would sit there at lunchtimes regaling people with bits of history, and a number of them said, "Why don't you write any of this stuff down?" And I was like, "Well, it's hard to get a book deal." And I started doing a Facebook page, which still exists. It's called History Jems with a G. And I eventually got it to over 90,000 subscribers, which is like, hey, thanks very much. People like this stuff. And that kind of led there. So if you like, if I had been born in the 50s and was sort of like starting to get these comments in, let's say, the 1970s, the technology just wasn't there to get it any further than that. But I just happened to get lucky that all this social media started building up ahead of steam. And what I found interesting is, in the interceding sort of 10 years or so, I've not given up on the Facebook page, but it's changed a lot to the point where I've just given up doing American history at all on any subject whatsoever, because I might write something about, let's say, colonists in the 1600s. And it's sort of like, it'll be, I don't know, a fight between the local colonists and Native Americans. And you'll get people saying, "Oh, it's the same today." No, it isn't. Yeah. You don't have the Inquisition nowadays. You don't have, people understand ethnic issues, and, white supremacy is bad. And, we don't use single shot muskets anymore. There are so many different things that are different today. Don't be that stupid and facile. But what I would get if I dared to do anything after World War II, I'd basically have both sides screaming at me. And so if you like, I used to be out there pushing, hey, here's an interesting fact. And you mentioned the Forgotten Histories book. What the first Forgotten History book was all about was basically I compiled loads of the Facebook articles and just sort of went and sort of like, again, properly edited them, researched them further, grew them out a bit. And it turned into a book. But I've done a second one of those called Slinkies and Snake Bombs. Same idea, just different name. And I may do a third one, but I've stopped writing those articles now because it's just not worth it. You'd either get the regulars talking to you on Facebook who are the same people week in, week out. Hi, thank you very much. Thank you for your support. But anytime it went viral, it went to angry places of the internet, and I just don't care. I don't know why you're screaming at me, because these are facts. These aren't opinions. These aren't up for debate. The Battle of Hastings happened in 1066. Sorry, we lost. I don't know why you're getting so upset about it.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something that I found as well with doing the podcast on YouTube, because there's so much out there. It's almost if almost the death of history is the fact that now anyone can comment on it and anyone can make videos on it. And I don't know if you get this, but certainly me amongst friends, people will talk about certain things and they don't necessarily have the same kind of critical mindset that I guess you're taught in the degree to have about sources, about information. And some of the stuff that people end up spurting online and everything, with some considerable views as well, it's a difficult thing to contend with. So it's tricky, because on one hand, social media is such an asset to have now, especially like building up a personal brand, doing stuff like this. But there's so many challenges with it as well. Everyone's got an opinion. It can be difficult to navigate that.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting what you said. I've been thinking about this, and I've been trying to sort of get it into one of my podcasts about how, let's face it, when you leave university, you got a degree, and you then have to claim to companies. It's like, oh yeah, my degree in archaeology, medieval history, that'll definitely help me run a retail outlet. It's like, no, it won't. But one of the things you are taught in history is look at what this source material is, because there's no such thing as a completely unbiased source material. So what's its bias? What's it actually trying to say? Whose side is it picking? And that is so important nowadays. Just because I read something I like on Facebook doesn't make it true. And you get all this stuff, again, particularly sort of through the lens of America. It's called Patriot Thunder Eagle News, and everybody who loves Patriot Thunder Eagle stuff goes, it has to be true. It's like, and the mainstream media is the lamestream media. It's like, no, they're the ones who pay actual journalists to go out and research this stuff. This other person is just a crazy person who's got an opinion and slapping it online. And just because it sounds cool doesn't make it true. And so we're trained on that. And you're absolutely, look, I think also, to be fair, there's some excellent stuff online. That, like, there's the Great War Channel, which week by week did World War One and has continued after. So basically, it started in 2014, went to the end of 2018, but kept going. It's still running, saying, look, there were so many wars and so many conflicts and changes that happened after World War One, like the Russian Revolution, for example, and they do their research, and their stuff is clearly unbiased, and they work really, really hard to do it. So there are good guys out there, but it isn't hard to quickly fall into the bad stuff. Yeah,
I guess that can be a tricky thing, and I wonder what you think as a populist historian. How do you navigate between, I guess, the academia, the experts, and then the general public? Because you're in a kind of fine line between them, where when you're writing, you've got to kind of, do you try to appease both? Do you try to include the more highbrow stuff, but also then the kind of the context that, that then is accessible for general audiences? Or do you just then focus on one or the other?
It's an interesting question. I don't think any of my books are properly academic. I have had a few people turn around. Another question I get asked is, why do you pick these topics? And it's like, well, I usually pick them because I don't think anybody else has done them. So my first published book is a deusful to concise history of the Crusades. And the reason why I wrote that is I did it at university. I've always loved the Crusades as a topic, but there were no introductory books that covered all the Crusades. They tended to do the first 4 and that's it, or they only did the Middle East and it didn't happen anywhere else. And actually, it's a lot more complicated than that. So, in regards to this is one of the things. If you are a serious academic in crusading history, I'm not going to tell you anything you don't already know. But there's 12 of them. Everybody else, even if you're just a generalist medieval historian, you probably don't know much about the Northern Crusades or the Sixth Crusade or whatever it may be. So there's something there for everybody. But I think the problem with academia is everybody, it can be really, pardon my French, bitchy out there. Everybody's trying to get everybody else. I don't want you to be the best known person in Renaissance history. So they they're still human beings. They tear each other down. Now, obviously, you got to get the facts right. But what you end up doing whenever you read an academic history book is they are always hedging their bets. It could be this, it could be that. We know, and it's like, okay, so nobody can get offended by it, but I can't read this because page 7 tells you A and page 8 tells you A isn't right. So it's like I'm bored now. So I do have to find a through line. I never try and be biased. So you mentioned the Sultans book. Again, I wrote that because almost every book about the Ottoman Empire is written by Europe and is talking about how exotic it is, and it isn't that exotic. It was a European power, or it's written by or it's written. Well, there's 3 types of people. There's either the Westerners sort of saying, "Oh, isn't this exotic? Oh, the harem isn't nearly what you think it is," or it's written by people who used to be run by the Ottoman Empire, and basically they're the Nazis. And it's like, no, it's more complicated than that. I'm so sorry, it's offending your nationalistic sensibilities in the 21st century, but 300 years ago you were complicit and made money out and were very popular in the Ottoman Empire. Sorry that doesn't play well today. Or the third type is by modern day Turkey, which wants to make out the Ottoman Empire is brilliant and wonderful and everybody else were cheating liars and scum. And it's like, I am the first person to write something that sort of like is trying to thread the needle on that one. Sort of saying it's a bit exotic and they were bad to local populations, but it was this cultural entity in its own right that by contrast was actually very open and sort of agnostic to people. And I have had really nasty comments about it from certain peoples, and I also for a while they tried to review bomb it on Amazon as well. So I think that tells you that I'm probably doing it right if I'm getting people. So I would say to people, if you want to read one book on the Ottoman Empire and you know nothing really about it, read this. Then if you talk to a Turk or a Greek or an Albanian or a Syrian, they will give you very different views. And you go, oh, did Jem get it completely wrong? It's like, well, go back to the book and see why they might be angry or see why they haven't even been taught half this stuff. So I'll stop there. But that's the best answer I can give you on that.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. And it's interesting you say about like towards the end there about the review bombing and everything, because obviously you are kind of, I mean, in the public eye in a sense that you are, you know, there is going to be criticism and everything. And also, you know, as you say, academia itself can be at times very toxic. I mean, how do you personally cope with that? Because I self-published a book last year and I got a negative review, and it's all I could think about that day. And it was in my head and I could not stop.
You ask anybody and they'll all say that the 1-star reviews stick in their heads far more than the 5-star reviews. So you are in good company there, Luke, and I feel the same way. And occasionally I reach out to these people and sort of talk. You can also tell when their mind's made up. Like I did one on the British Empire in 100 Facts, and an Indian guy reviewed it and went, this is just riddled with errors. So I went back to him going, tell me what the errors are. There's a second edition coming out. Never heard from him. What he means is, I didn't learn this in school, and therefore it's all wrong. And it's like, no, you were taught some toxic stuff. Now, actually, the British Empire in 100 Facts, I got reprinted by my publisher to India, and I had to take a fact out because it was too uncomfortable for Indians, and I replaced it with something else to do with India that was a bit more fun in inverted commas. So you might turn around and say, Jem, you're compromising your artistic integrity there, but hey, I want to sell some books as well.
Exactly. So I want to, obviously we're talking about a lot of books, so I want to go back to kind of the beginning. Writing a book, I mean, I'm on the edge of about to start writing one for the next. I mean, I've booked myself for 2 years. I mean, how do you go about writing it? Do you, what's your process? What's your kind of, yeah, I mean, do you go on these retreats where you hide away for a month, or do you kind of just go at it? I mean, yeah, what's your process in writing books?
You've watched Love Actually.
I
That
have,
doesn't
yeah,
happen
that's the
anywhere.
first thing that came to mind.
No, no, no. I think screenwriters write those themes in hoping that people will give them money for a retreat. No,
Yeah.
almost everybody writes in a coffee shop. I personally write at home. But anyway, this is something else I actually feel really passionate about, because there's a whole cottage industry about paying me and I'll tell you how to write a book or show you the tricks of blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no, absolutely not. What I've discovered, my wife has written a number of screenplays and I've written a number of books, and I know a few other writers. Everybody does it differently. There's no right or wrong way. It's whatever works for you. And so long as you're moving forwards with your manuscript, you're doing a good job. I think the biggest problem is people sort of like do 2 chapters and then give up. Now, I'll give you 2 different examples with myself to sort of answer your question. So we mentioned, you said sort of like you've done a book on the Romans and the president. So my publisher has this series called X, a historical topic, X, in 100 facts. And I got to write 4 of them. So they were British Empire, Napoleonic Wars, Romans, and American presidents. So pretty diverse there.
Yeah.
And on each one of those, well, actually, the Napoleonic Wars, they came to me and went, can you do the Battle of Waterloo in 100 facts? And I went, not really, because by the time you get to fact 67, we're talking about belt buckles. Nobody's going to read that. However, it's 25 years of fighting across the whole world, but I reckon I could give you a good overview, a good starting point about the Napoleonic Wars, and we could do that in 100 facts. So there was that little debate, and then it's like, okay, but we need it, Jem. We need it by June 2015, because that's the celebration of 200 years of the Battle of Waterloo. So even though it's old, it's got a sell by date. Go and so write it. Fortunately, each one of those books is only about 40,000 words. It's not a huge task, and when you chop down the 100 facts, where you suddenly working out, it's like, well, okay, that's not that much per fact. So it's easy to chew through. But then my most recent book, literally just before this podcast, I have sent a sort of an amended manuscript to the publishers in America. It's out next summer, so I don't want to go too much into it now. But what happened was I had an idea last November, and the information had been sitting in my head. Broadly speaking, what it is there are historical movies, but are they actually history? And so, it's a little bit of Hollywood history, but also a little bit of like, okay, let's talk about the real history depicted in this movie. What did they get right? What did they get wrong? And clearly that's been in my mind for many, many years, because once it popped into my head, my brain just said, go. And in 11 days, I wrote 80,000 words. And I've never done that in my entire life. But it was just like my brain was nagging me.
Yeah.
I would go to bed and then I'd wake up at 5 in the morning and go, right, you've had enough sleep, Jem.
Yeah.
Crack on with the next chapter. Okay, brain. Now, obviously, the first version was riddled with grammatical errors and things like that, and also fever dreams. My editor, same editor on every single book I've done, sort of like turn around, Jem. What do you mean in this paragraph? And then I look at it and go, oh yeah, okay, right. Let's rearrange that.
Yeah.
So and I have heard people say, a famous, I can't remember their name, but a well-known writer of like novels said, you know how you download the story into your head and then you sort of like regurgitate it onto the pages, and other writers went, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Oh, that's the way it works for me. And so everybody is different. I don't want anybody to think what I've just said is right or what I've just said is wrong. That's just the way Jem writes a book. And if you do it a different way, all power to you. Like I say, the only thing I will stand by is get it done. Yeah. I do not understand. Like George R.R. Martin, we've been waiting more than 10 years for his next Game of Thrones book. And he even turned around about 4 years ago and went, it was meant to come out then. He hadn't finished it. And he went, I'm as disappointed as you. It's like, it's not a train that hasn't arrived. You're writing it. You've had 10 years. Sit down and write it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, okay, that is where I would slap somebody. But apart from that, you do you.
Yeah, but do you ever find yourself though? Because I mean, having I guess the highs of it, being able to write those 80,000 words in 11 days. Do you ever get the opposite, where it's 3 months and there's like barely 10,000 words? Do you ever get that kind of burnout, or are you just this machine that's able to keep going?
Well, simple answer is no. I've heard people talk about a writer's block, and
Mm.
I've never experienced it myself. But then again, personally, when I have a project, I do it.
Yeah.
But it's like basically when I wrote the first one, the first version of this last November, and then I've been trying to get it published, trying to get it to a publisher. During that time, I've tinkered around with the manuscript, but I can't say I've written anything else.
Yeah.
So, right now, I don't have anything to write. And I get the feeling it just recharges you. I think that the people who say you got to write 1,000 words every day, if that works for you, great. But if it does turn into writer's block, why are you doing it?
Mm.
Just go away and do something else. I think generally, this has been shown psychologically. Luke, do you play video games?
I do indeed.
There we go. Excellent. Well, so do I. So you might have had the situation where you've got to sort of like some kind of end of level challenge, end of level boss, whatever it may be. And you're getting pasted, and you get very frustrated, and you throw the controller across the room, and you swear that you're not going to do it again. But then you have a drink, and you I don't know, you go to bed, or you have a day's work, and you come back, and your brain has been chewing it over in your head. And when you sit down the next time to fight it, you get there, and it's like, well, why didn't I do that yesterday? And it's just because your brain has been working on several different levels. And I get the feeling it's the same thing with writing. So if you're just trying to grind it out, you're probably exhausting yourself. But again, if anybody's sitting going, well, that's not me, then I believe you. I think it really is. I think writing is incredibly personal, and yet the industry's trying to make out that there is a standard way of doing it. And like I say, there are these companies which literally make money saying, we'll tell you how to write a book. I think Shakespeare never went on one of those courses. I think you're okay without them.
Yeah, no, definitely. But okay, so you say there about obviously the industry, and obviously one of the things that I've certainly witnessed with trying to get this book off the ground that I'm about to write is that you write to many different literary agents, many different publishers. 99% of them say no. And I feel as though, I mean, would you give any advice to people about publishers, literary agents, how to kind of deal with them? I mean, I certainly heard from everyone, from a large number of people saying, whatever you do, get a literary agent as best as you can. What's your opinion on that kind of, all of that really?
Don't want to get cancelled here. Yeah, I would still love a literary agent. I'd still love one, but I've failed to get one. But the thing is, though, if we're talking about non-fiction, look, if anybody's listening to this going, I'm going to write a history book and I'm going to make my millions that way, never happens. Okay, there is no history book, there is no non-fiction book that you can retire on the proceeds of. Okay, and even when we come to things like novels, basically, if you think of almost every history book or non-fiction book, it's quite often written by a professor who already has a job. Or this is one of these weird sectors where it's the second job of people. And so, okay, yes, there's J.K. Rowling. Yes, there's Lee Childs. Okay, but the point is, you run out pretty quickly of people who spend their entire life writing books and making money from those books. So yeah, you have to be careful on that. I think that if you do really want to write a history book, you've got a real passion for this particular topic, reach out to publishers. And I have managed to get my stuff published because they will listen to you. Because there are loads of people who think they're the next J.K. Rowling. There aren't loads of people who think they're writing the next Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. So it's a smaller marketplace.
Yeah.
So when it comes to literary agents, the thing I'll feel sorry for them is they don't know what's going to be the next hit.
Yeah.
They have to put time and effort into you, and until you get published and until that book starts making money, only then do they get their 10 or 15%. So they really have to play a guessing game. Now, the bit I am going to be slightly controversial about is, in the modern world, there are too many of me. I'm a middle-aged white guy. Okay. And so therefore, what people like now when it comes to the writers is the story as well.
Yeah.
if you've come from a working class background, you're a person of color, maybe you're non-binary or something like that. There's a story there that makes you different to Stephen King or Jem Duducu or whatever. So suddenly they will give, and we need more representation. I get that, but the problem is, I'll never forget this, sitting down with my first historical novel with this literary agent, and I sent over a copy of it, and also gave them a couple of copies of my published works, so to prove that I can finish a book. And I'll never forget this feedback she gave me. She went, "Jem, you can write. Great. Okay, I want to know that I'm producing a quality product. Knowing I can write is useful." And she goes, "And this is a commercial idea. Brilliant. Again, I don't want to sell 2 copies. I want to sell 20,000 copies." But she then said, "But I'm just not in love with it enough." Well, what am I meant to do with that feedback? I'm not asking you to marry the book. I'm asking you to promote it. If you're saying it's a sellable commodity, sell it. But the thing is, though, and I know I'm rambling here, Luke, but a part of my day job, I go to exhibitions. I used to work in a company that runs lots of exhibitions. I don't know if you've ever been to a trade show or a conference or exhibition where there's a huge hall with lots of stands of different sizes. Okay, so the second largest publishing trade show in the world is called the London Book Fair. And I've been to the London Book Fair 4 or 5 times. And all you need to do is walk in there, and that's the problem. Because you walk into something like, several halls of Excel or Olympia or something like that, and every single stand is selling books for the next 12 months. And there are hundreds of them. And no way are all of these going to be big hits. It's like when you go to some of those discount bookstores and you pick up a book, it's like it's 50p or something, and it's completely new, and you read it and you go, "That's a good book. Why is it given away? I've never heard of it." Because there are thousands of books being released. And now on top of that, you've got things like Amazon, KDP, they're sort of like the direct publishing thing, that basically the way you can self-publish. So there's a whole load of self-published people out there. Books like The Martian and 50 Shades of Grey, these all started as self-published books. So there's an even broader way of getting your book out to the market. And so, okay, I feel sorry for the literary agents because I understand they're kind of shooting in the dark and hoping that they hit something. But at the same time, I don't know what I need to do to prove. Here is a stack, literally a stack of books I've had published who are good enough that I keep being asked to publish stuff. And, you also liked what I've written. Come on, what do I need to do? And even I've managed to fail with that over a 10-year period.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Sorry, I really went off on one there, Luke.
No, you're completely fine. And it's something that, I've had a lot to think about as well, because I went through to begin with the Amazon Kindle Direct with my first book, because I was like, I had tons of people telling me, okay, you won't be taken seriously as a historian until you're published, until you've got a book that you can that holds testament to you. So I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to write a book, forget the whole process. It doesn't really matter about making money, and I'm going to self-publish it. But it's interesting because although then it's like, okay, well, people were like, okay, you must be so proud you've published a book. But I almost feel like I've cheated because of the fact it's self-published, because I've skipped all the other steps and I've just written it and I've checked it over myself and I've gone, yeah, that looks good. And then I'm going to charge people money. So it's an interesting thing, although in a way it's almost made it a lot easier for people to become authors. And then that combined with obviously building personal brands like podcasts and whatever, you can kind of build an audience. I mean, do you think there's a stigma to self-publishing? Do you think it kind of... things like this Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing is changing publishing?
Look, it's definitely changing publishing. Just the fact that you've got things like Audible now. I keep being asked when your book's going to be on Audible, Jem. It's like, my publisher doesn't do that, and it takes quite a lot of effort to read out a book and do the audio editing and all that kind of stuff. Although one of my first historical novel is currently being turned into an Audible version of the book, and so that'll be out probably by the autumn. So look, I hear you on that, and so look, let's talk about my first historical novel. So that's the one where the literary agent went, I'm not in love with it. It's called Silent Crossroads, and it's the story of a World War I Tommy. It's the story of this guy called Harry Woods, and he is the only British soldier to have fought in both world wars for both sides.
Right.
So he's a fictional character,
yeah.
but what it means is he starts off as a Tommy. He ends up flipping over to the German side in World War One. Why? Because love. He falls in love with a German nurse. And then in the interwar years, it allows me to show you the German experience from the point of view of an outsider there. And, he like I say, he falls in love, he gets married, he has a kid. And so he watches his daughter grow up at the time of Hitler. And it's sort of like this adorable little girl is being taught anti-Semitic, hate stuff, as part of the standard curriculum. So I'm showing you the stuff from a different perspective there. And so it's a family drama, it's a war drama, but also the reason why it's Silent Crossroads, because he keeps making these choices in his life. And I think as you go along, you understand why he's making those choices, but towards the end of the book, he has to come to terms with all the choices he's made. I won't say any more than that. I always thought it was a good idea. Literally everybody who's read it went, great idea. I ended up having to get it self-published. But here's the thing. I use the same editor that I use for my published books, so I know that the quality's there. And I even got a company called Greenwich Design. Shout out to Greenwich Design. Basically, somebody who worked in Greenwich Design liked the manuscript so much, went, we're going to design the front cover for free. Now, this is a actual design house. So quite frankly, apart from the ISBN number on the back of the book, what's the difference between that and a published work? Now, the thing about self-publishing is it is the Wild West. I could get drunk, write out 3 pages and stick it on KDP, and KDP won't turn around and say, that's not good enough, Jem. So you have to be careful on the self-publishing. So, I mean, from what sounds of things, look, it's been properly edited. It's been done by somebody who knows the actual area of research as well. So it's quality. So you put all those things together. That's a published work. It's out there. As soon as you get one person who doesn't know you, so long as it's not your mum, if there's one person out there who's read it who doesn't know you, you're an author. What's the difference between that and again, there was no formal publishing process for Shakespeare. He just wrote the stuff down. It eventually got stuck into some folios, and we remember him 500 years later. So I think. But the reality is, what does a publishing house do for you that self-publishing doesn't? Is they got the marketing, they got the names and contacts and PR, so they can get things out a bit. But again, I'm sometimes seeing more money because the standard, just so everybody knows, the standard deal on publishing is generally you get 8%. So they get 92%, but you wrote the damn thing. So there have been some times where I've made more money from my self-published works than from my own published works. But the other thing is, once the book's out there, it's still out there. I'm still getting revenues from my very first book, like you, was a self-published history book, and it tickles me that every now and then I see, it sold 2 more copies. Okay, that's lovely. And I've had a few people who've loved my other books who've gone to that one. I've had a couple of 3-star reviews going, Jem gets better. And it's like, why didn't you go back and change it? And it's like, but for me, it's like a historical record. This is where it all started. And today I would write it differently. But okay, fine. That's my choice. Dealer's choice. And I, as the writer, I am the dealer.
That's brilliant. So I guess it's interesting that you say that your first book was kind of, I guess, historical fiction, right?
No. So the very first book was a history book, non-fiction book. But I just couldn't get it published. But it taught me a lot, and that's how I ended up getting published with my second book, the Crusades book.
Got you. Sorry, yeah.
But then my first historical novel that came about, I don't know, 5-6 years later.
Right. Yeah. Sorry. So that I find particularly interesting because I find that genre quite interesting because I have a friend who absolutely loves it. But I almost feel like, is it almost misleading? Is there a responsibility that if you write historical fiction to maybe separate facts from the fiction, to make it clear when you're doing so? Because it can mislead audiences. And then kind of returning back to what we said at the beginning, there is, as well, with so much out there, people can spurt a lot of rubbish.
So, okay, so I absolutely hear you on that. And I hate it when the central character is somebody famous. It's like, here's George Washington and he's off doing stuff. And it's like, you're putting words into a historical figure's mouth. So I said Harry Woods in this historical novel, he's fictional. And every single, I've written 4 historical novels, and my central characters and all of them are fictional. So therefore I can put them wherever I need to put them. But I have a rule with myself. You know, if they meet anybody historical, or if they're a part of a historical event, it has to be right.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's what I've done in, you know, so when I describe the start of the Kaiserschlacht in World War I, which was the last big German offensive in 1918, I get it right down to the minute and the general tactics that they're using. Now, the men who die in that or get captured in that chapter are fictional, but I'm not misleading anybody in regards to that. So I absolutely hear what you're saying. And it, you know, I guess this is one of the things that makes Sharp so popular and other things like that, because they are fictional, but they get to bump up against, oh, look, there's the Duke of Wellington or whatever it may be, you know, so, you know, the Last Kingdom with the Anglo-Saxons, etc. So, yeah, I hear you on that. And there is lots of bad historical fiction out there. And also there's historical fiction which starts repurposing these people to make them, you know, it makes them completely anachronistic. The thing, have you watched Peaky Blinders, for example? Yeah, okay. I mean, just a couple of things. You know, the fact that you got Tommy Shelby, he's basically fictional, but the way he acts, he's like he's nice to women, he's great to minorities. You know, he's worried about his alcoholism. None of all of this is 21st century. He's a working class guy from Birmingham. That is not how a working class guy from Birmingham in 1920 would think. I'm sorry. And that's the problem, because it's offensive to us today. But the other thing about the Peaky Blinders is they'd all been wiped out. They'd been cleared out before World War I, not after World War I. And so that just tells you all of this is garbage.
Yeah.
So, but you really have to know your stuff. I ended up reading a book about the real Peaky Blinders, clearly written by a historian who was sort of having a hissy fit, and quite right too. It's like, this is all as made up as Marvel movies, and it's like, okay, fair enough. Cheers, mate.
Yeah. No, that's definitely, I guess, something that's can be very tricky with history as a topic. But in any case, we have only 1 minute remaining. So,
oh my God,
I know. Just quickly, 2 things. Firstly, is there any kind of socials or any podcasts or any publication that you'd like to quickly promote, give a shout out to, that people can kind of direct themselves to if they want to know more about you?
I'm going to say Condensed Histories is my podcast. It's where I take a piece of pop culture, like a movie or TV show, and say, hey, look, there's some real history behind this stuff. And I tear Peaky Blinders to pieces, for example. I'm also at Jem Duducu. That's JEMDUDUCU, at Jem Duducu on Twitter, if you want to say hi.
Brilliant. And in one sentence, if you could give advice to someone who wants to be an aspiring author of history, what would it be?
Don't give up.
Lovely. Thank you ever so much for coming, and thank you. And please watch some of the other interviews coming out soon. They'll be weekly. So thank you very much. And that's that.